And here we are at the end of our read-through of Circle of Hands. The final chapter, Light and Darkness, is basically the Monsters and Animals chapter. And so, to help get us through it, here's my smallest monster. It's hard to say. He's joining me for a moment. The chapter opens up stating pretty clearly that this is not a game really where your protagonists, your characters, spend most of their time clashing against beasts, monsters. It's more about what is again described as soap opera, the interaction perhaps of clashing viewpoints and ideals. However, the game does provide you with a pretty solid supply, let's say, of things against which to test your characters, or things which can be the source of community problems, or things which are out there going bump in the night and maybe need to be addressed, or maybe need to be left alone. And I like that just fine. So without further ado, let's take a look at Chapter 7, which will be the last chapter we go through in this way. This is not actually the end of the chapters of the book. The end of the book contains the original version of the game, which is called Grey Magic, and contains essays on the Heartbreaker Redemption Project. I'm not going to go through these. This was about learning the game. But I do recommend that people read them, particularly those who like the game, who are interested in comparing different, let's say, editions of a game to each other. It's worth your time, and I'll certainly be willing to talk with you about that if you so desire. So let's get into the chapter itself. Chapter 7, entitled Light and Darkness, runs from page 137 to page 159. It opens, as we should have come to expect by now, with the author speaking to us directly about how to use this chapter, or what this chapter is about. The first page is organized with this using this chapter section, where the author speaks to us directly, and then there is a summary reminding us of the steps involved in preparation, and which ones specifically call out the use of creatures and monsters. Then, the next column, it's looking at the Manticore, using it as an example of what you can expect. Okay. The next page, it's called In the Moment, and this focuses on description. Right? And I feel it's aimed mostly at GMs or players who worry about too much description, not enough description, not the right kind of description, who are maybe worried about trying a game that trusts you enough to give you so little information. I'll say that again. It trusts you. It shows its trust for you and your group running the game by not overwhelming you with information, by not giving you book after book after book filled with monster stats and monster descriptions. Right? Play the game. Right? Be inspired. Play the game. That's the feeling I'm getting from this. So we have the brief 4-paragraph section in the moment. Right? Describe what's needed. You know, if you have the book, read it for yourself. It's good. Okay. Then it moves into something called Ordinary and Everywhere. And it has headers like Animals and Peasants, Unnamed People. Moves into Named People and Beasts. So here's the system of organization in the game. We've got animals, beasts, unnamed people, named people, each one getting progressively more. Beasts are not just an animal. Named people are not just a person, not an extra. Then it explains beasts in the regions. Beasts in Tamarion, beasts in Famberga, beasts in Rolke, beasts in Spur. The next section is monsters, and it does the same thing. Right? Monsters in Spur. Right? Monsters in Famberga. Right? Monsters in Tamarion, and monsters in Roll-K. And there are images for some of the monsters and not for others. Right. Then we have monsters throughout the lands, which is good. Then we move into the creatures of magic, which are divided by type of magic, white and black. Okay. Then, after we go through, and I should say that the magical creatures are ranked according to, in the same way that spells are ranked from 1, 2, or 3 dots of their respective magical allegiance. And then, after we get through that section, we end up with a quick reference. The one given to us is Carl Edward Wagner's Death Angel's Shadow. Right. And he describes that the 3 stories are picture perfect for a monster, right, white magic, and dark magic. So, a useful reference to get a clearer insight into what was intended for this section, and perhaps license to go out and be inspired by things. Bring those inspirations into your gaming, particularly when you feel, aha, that's perfect for whatever game concept you want to show. To discuss the use of this chapter, I'm again going to take it out of order. Right? From what we would expect from the chapter, we'll start with monsters. Right? Now, each monster entry includes a small flowchart, which is identified as prep and play. And this is fundamentally here to help resist any urges people unfamiliar with the play style espoused by the game to avoid directing, avoid creating plot. It's a convenient list of how these creatures, these things, connect with their environment, how they're typically uncovered, so that you can conceive of how to use them without automatically having to force them into the story. You know, the characters will uncover this when. Okay. So, for example, we have the man snake. All right, so you read about what the man snake is, and then it says prep and play, and it describes how they are discovered normally, and what effect they have on people that they interact with, and then it describes like the kind of evidence that might be obvious, and then it gives us their stats and the way that they behave in combat or in interaction. Right. So for the example of the man snake, it says a person recovers from a lingering illness with memories of the snake. That's it. So if this is appropriate, you know, in the course of play, this might come out. Then a point. He or she murders someone, right? Usually secretly, then gains +1 quickness and eventually commits murder again. Right, so now we're going to have these trail of murders, not connected directly to the Circle Knights as a matter of plot, but something that they could experience, hear about, see taking place in the community in which they live. Okay. If the person refuses to commit these murders as goaded by the inhabiting being, the man snake, then this person experiences no further urges or effects. Right. His or her family or other intimates fall ill with a fever, soon to develop man snakes of their own. Right. So then it describes what a person who is in the act of committing concurrent murders would be like. We get their stats, how the man snake fights, and then a little bit of history. You know, what do we know about them from ancient times? And then the note that Circle Knights are plot armored against hosting a man snake. There are a few of these scattered throughout. Like, this sort of thing will not have an effect on a Circle Knight Why not? I feel it's much in the same way that pulp heroes seem to be curiously resistant to the things which afflict the people that they're helping. Right? It's, as described, plot armor. You're going to be able to behave heroically. You're not going to have to worry about being consumed by this possessing entity. At the same time, you are extremely likely to get your ass handed to you by the possessed person. So you still have to fight. You still have to struggle. You're just not going to have to struggle about the thing which will take away your player agency. Okay. So there are a lot of creatures in here, and they are divided up by region all the way through the book for each classification of creature. So we've just talked about monsters and how they are presented. Let's jump back to the beginning to talk about animals and peasants. It makes sound kind of funny. Why are animals and peasants together? Because in the implied culture of the game, right, something that all the characters understand, but which might not be obvious to the players, animals and peasants are considered to be a part of the ecology, their landscape. In one sense of things, their food. Right? Peasants are not people that you talk to. And in fact, in the mechanics of the game, these are not people that you can go to and persuade or charm or whatever. Unless your character was actually a peasant themselves, peasants are no different from animals. And you're not going to walk into the barnyard and try and persuade the cow to help you out. It's that kind of, social structure. Now, it is possible, from one point of view, for these social levels to be changed, right? But peasants are not among the things which will be, or which you can ascend to a higher level during the course of play. Peasants are peasants, unless they're a circle knight. Right? So that's kind of interesting, I think. Then we get into named people and beasts. Now, these are the things that you do interact with. Right? These are the things that can hurt you. Now, the beasts might not be as active as the monsters. They might not be carrying out activities other than just being beasts in the region. A bear hunting or foraging for food, or a pack of wolves doing the same. But they are certainly more than just incidental animals, or the invisible, ubiquitous, hardworking peasant. Named people, likewise. These are people that actually do things. The monsters and magical threats all receive this prep and play flowchart, as described in the text, so that you can, right, as you go through your adventure preparation, you realize that one of these beings is going to be involved. You can go through its flowchart and then decide where along those listed items is relevant to the community that's being envisioned. Is this something that's simply going to be followed through in sequence, or are you going to skip ahead to a part that connects with that region or the other elements that were generated during venture preparation? For some, Chapter 7 may be difficult to use. It presents its contents in a way that is focused quite intensely on the agenda of the creature, what the thing does. And that's it. It doesn't give you plot hooks, really. Again, the plot is emergent. It doesn't give you a lot of information about habitat other than, which region you're more likely to encounter it in. I'll give you an example. A creature aligned with black magic is entitled the Angel. And this is a pretty significant threat, rated at 3 dots in black magic, the highest rating. The Angel is a beautiful humanoid whose dark wings typically enfold it like a cloak. It is typically perceived only through an individual's dreams. A wizard can sense the presence of an angel, but it is forced into visible existence and into vulnerability to combat or magic only if its host, lover, or whatever is convinced to reject or reveal it. So, this is this intangible being which has its own agenda, which is focused specifically on the person which has summoned it. And unless that person rejects it or reveals it, the Circle Knights are not going to be messing with it. Right? That's interesting. Then you get its stats. Then this description of how it fights, which is to drain points away from the creature. It wraps them up in its wings. This is a cool image, actually. And kind of holds them in its embrace so that they can't act, and then sucks the life out of them. To even attack it, right, requires a roll, a charm roll. Now, the angel typically becomes visible in dreams to a single person, and it gives a rating of what level of the charm attribute they'll be attracted to. And they provide intense comfort and affection. And if such a person is not provided to them, they'll go get one. And they appear in their dreams. The prep and play section, it describes that the angel regularly attacks people of a certain charm or higher that its summoner or lover, or the person with whom it has that relationship, knows personally. So it's in your head. It understands who you know and what you know about them, and it goes out and it attacks them. Okay, and it comes back to you and shares the experience of that attack in your dreams. If, I'm going to use the word host, right? If the host rejects these advances, then the angel retaliates, scarring them, and leaves them to find someone more willing. Is now free to go find someone else in the region. And there's nothing in here about plot. There's nothing in here about use this when, introduce this in this kind of terrain or territory. It simply describes what this creature does. This is what it does. So you have one in tonight's venture. You know what it does, right? And you know perhaps to whom it is connected. And then as play goes on, is this uncovered or not? Does this ever enter play or not? Does this become a focus of attention from the players or not? All of that is left up to play itself. To go through what's covered, let's start with beasts. The people are kind of self-explanatory. So it gives you rules for, or gives you the rubric for the prep and play thing for beasts in general, and advice on which venture preparation elements they're best suited for, or how to align them with the flow of things. And then it explains how you can build your own beast, really. The typical ranges for a beast, and so on. How vulnerable they are to certain attack types, the way that they attack, how they relate to the advantage die in combat, that sort of thing. Then it breaks down into region, and they give us the example of one typical beast per region. Right? So in Tamarion, we've got the Ocker, we've got wolves from Femberga, we've got the iconic panther from Rolke, we've got rats from Spur, and we also have dolphins from Spur. And this includes rules for swarms. Then we get into the monsters. For monsters, we have the Mansnake, the Golden, the Manticore, Spider Hags, the Racker, the Pode, the Worm, Ogres, Avatars, Unicorn, Pegasus, Valkyrie, Eidolon, Guide, Lamassu, the Silver Dragon, Undead, right? A class of creatures here, the Undead. We've got the Draugr, we've got the Haunt, the Ghoul, the Lich. Then we get into demons. We have the Doll, the Imp, the Splotch, an interestingly, strangely pronounced thing, Nzagg. Pronounce it as you see fit. The Nightmare, the Eye, the Angel, the Yuggoth, the Dancer. And we're done. A wide, varied presentation of specific creatures that inhabit the Crescent Lands. Right? Beating creatures is not the focus of play. You'll not find 500 entries in the monster section of this game. It's not that kind of thing. But there's enough material here of different types that, should you find yourself in a preparation with a lot of play of unwanted repetition, you can quite easily generate your own thing. And by that point, you would be familiar with how the rubric flows and likely practice enough to not fall into the pitfalls of plot as described by the game. And that really is the end of that chapter. This might be the only read-through chapter where the promise of short holds true. The, let's say, final installment in this series will be my overview of the game, what I think about it now that we've worked our way through it, now that we've talked about its issues, and now that I've had some feedback from the author about my interpretations of the early chapters. So that will come along in due course.